All right, we're live.
Welcome to the second episode of the American Math Podcast. Today, we're going to have a discussion about an ongoing internet topic, which is the imperial system versus the metric system, which is a better system. And I'm having a discussion with my colleague here, Jelani.
Hello, everybody.
And Jelani is... Well, I'll let you explain what you're saying. You were saying that you don't think that we should be giving a lot of time and attention to the topic of bitric versus metric.
Well, no, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be giving it a lot of time. I'm just speaking from my own experiences, especially in high school and college. How I went to an architecture, construction, and engineering high school.
How long ago?
That was back in 2017, 2018. That's when I first got in.
Relatively recent, within the past decade.
Definitely within the past decade. So pretty recently, and I graduated during or like right after COVID and stuff. So it's pretty fresh. And in my time there, I've even though we were a school that focused on architecture, construction, and engineering, where you need to know the bitric system and the metric system so that you can use them together when building things like 3D printing or fabricating, because we had CNC machines and had projects when we had to build physical projects throughout the school year. So it's like, even in those classes, there was a less of an emphasis on the bitric system in the classroom in a day-to-day.
What about the metric system?
Or the metric system either. It was like I saw the metric system a lot and I had some understanding of the units prior to from self-study and other like after-school study programs, but the first real introduction to the different units and how they applied to science was in my chemistry class. And even then, that was just a brief, 1 week long introduction to the metric system and its units. Mm-hmm. And for the bitric system, it was similar, where we would just go into inches and fractions of an inch to prepare for a test for a certification that half the class failed. But it's like we have to keep things moving and get on to the next module. So we kept on pushing, and there was a lot of, grace when it came to giving makeup tests or second attempts, stuff like that. But there wasn't as much of a push for mastering the bitric or the metric system in the classroom. Now, I want to make it clear and say that I think focusing on the bitric and the metric system as priorities should be the mainstay approach.
Primary focus.
It should be the primary focus when it comes to the education system as a whole. I think everyone needs to have a solid understanding of how their environment was even built and the units that went into making it up and how they relate to each other. That's especially important for U.S. citizens, because you never know when you might come across it. And the measurement systems apply from the classroom to the boardroom to the kitchen to the penthouse suite. It's like if you try to go meet with an international official and you don't understand the relationships between a kilogram and a pound, that could cause some confusion, and that's necessary for your job. But real world and the academic educational space are two different worlds right now. And I want to work with bitric, and I want our work to create the outcome where that's no longer the case.
But we're bridging the gap between
between the real world and the academic world,
okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because there are children in school who are learning about inequalities and graphing forces and quadratics that they're never going to use in real life, right? Okay. There are certain fields.
So you're not talking about social inequality. You're talking about mathematical inequality.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm speaking strictly to math. The inequalities in math, as a concept, as a mathematical concept, and and focusing on geometry. And whenever I speak with parents, when I work with Bitrick and work through Bitrick, the focus is generally on, high school level and higher level mathematics and how they can learn it and get better at it. Because I was saying before the podcast that you can kind of brute force your way through multiplication and through elementary school.
What do you mean by brute force? Like memorize your math facts?
Yeah, memorize your math facts, memorize processes and procedures. You don't need to know why 11 times 11 equals 121. You just need to memorize 11 times 11 equals 121. And I'm even speaking from my own experience because I didn't understand why 11 times 11 equaled 121 when I was in elementary school. I was just told memorize it, and I memorized the process to get there without having the conceptual understanding of what the math was doing to get me to that answer. So let me backtrack a little bit. Again, the academic world and the real world are two different worlds right now. And even though learning the Bitrick system, learning the metric system, understanding them conceptually, and having that foundational understanding is most important to your real world prosperity, there are millions of children and teenagers who are in the academic system, and even adults who are in these academic systems in high school, elementary school, middle school, college, who are all struggling with trying to succeed in these academic worlds, right? And changing that academic world takes a long time, and there's a lot of red tape, and there's a lot of, people that you have to talk to, a lot of conflicting opinions and different priorities in order to make the stuff that really matters be taught and prioritized in the school. And I want to connect with the children and with the people who have a fear of math and who need this program most, because Bitrick extends beyond just teaching the measurement system. We have methods of teaching algebra and geometry and intermediate algebra. I remember when I was in an intermediate algebra class, and Bitrick saved me from that, right? And I know that's what a lot of people struggle with. So when we try to reach out to provide these solutions, I think that speaking to those pain point areas of where people are looking and struggling and going onto YouTube and looking up, how do I do this geometry thing, or how do I do this calculus problem, right? And they find a solution that really genuinely helps them. I think that that is a good way for us to gather our what's it called? Our end consumer and the people that would benefit most from this program.
So what I'm trying to understand is, from what you were saying earlier, you were concerned that focusing on the Bitrick system versus the metric system is not connected to the learning path of traditional education environments. Are you seeing that as a good thing, or is that a not so good thing?
No, I would see it as a negative when they're disconnected. And that's also something, again, I'm really working hard to try to figure out a sustainable solution, because I even remember in high school, the teachers we had CTE, who were career technical education teachers, who were like carpenters, HVAC technicians, electricians, who have decades of experience. So they're familiar with the math in a practical sense.
Which measurement system are we talking about?
In the Bitrick system. Okay. And metric in certain areas, because in things like HVAC, electric, and construction, you do need to have an understanding of the metric system, but they mostly use the Bitrick system.
Okay, so let me just understand. So to be fair to those who might not understand, let's first define the metric system. The metric system is a standard unit of measurement that are called standard. Well, it's a French word, but it basically means standard unit of measure, or they're called the SI units. It was founded by the French. I think they were introduced in 1795, and they've gone on to be the global standard of measurement throughout the world, with the exception of 3 countries. Those 3 countries are the United States of America, Liberia, which was once somewhat of a related colony in Africa, and then there's a country called Myanmar, I think formerly Burma. These are the only three countries that continue to use what has traditionally been known as the imperial system. The imperial system here in the United States of America is called the U.S. customary system. But there's been very little research, science, and scientific research and development of the U.S. customary system or the imperial system by the bodies that are intended to update it. Our organization here, BITRIC, which is the Benjamin Banneker Institute for Technology, Research, Innovation, and Creativity, has taken on the task of researching and developing the measurement system of the United States of America, that was the scientific research and development of the measurement system that was used to build America's infrastructure. And from our research, what we found is that America was built with an ancient standard unit of measurement that can be traced back to biblical times. So we've invested well over a decade of research and development into this ancient measurement system, which seems to exist inside the Americas and outside of the Americas prior to becoming a European colony, prior to the Spanish or the British or the Portuguese even arriving to the Americas. This ancient measurement system seemed to be standardized and used in ancient civilizations all over the world. So we have Mayan pyramids that seem to have some relation to the ancient cubit. We have ancient Egyptian and ancient African pyramids, even in Nubia, that seem to have some relationship to the ancient cubit. We have stone monuments, stone circles found at the great city of Zimbabwe, Mapungubwe, the stone circles found throughout all of Africa. Some great work has been done by Michael Tillinger on stone circles in southern Africa, which used a standard unit of measurement that was adopted by the Nubians, by the Egyptians, the Carthaginians, the Moors, the Greeks, the Romans. And the Romans took the use of the ancient cubit into Britain to build its ancient infrastructure and roadways. And this was, I'm talking about 1500 years prior to the British even becoming an imperial power, before taking the imperial system to what ultimately became the United States of America. So the U.S. customary system and the imperial system are descendants of the ancient cubit. And it's a standardized unit of measurement that was used to build America's infrastructure. And since it predates the metric system by thousands of years, that it's virtually impossible to reverse engineer America to use the metric system, at least for its built environment. Anything that's not held down can use the metric system, but for our infrastructure, our roadways, our infrastructure is expansive. It's been built over the course of 400 years, and it's heavily dependent on the standard unit of measurement that was used to build it, which was based on the ancient cubit. The BITRIC is the modern measurement system for the ancient cubit. It was necessary to create the BITRIC system for the continued scientific research and development of the ancient standard unit of measurement that we now recognize as the cubit. So all of this research has come to a time where we need to thoroughly understand in our global economy both measurement systems, both the ancient cubit measurement system, which we today call BITRIC, and its complement, the international system of units called the metric system. So that is the background to what BITRIC and metric are. I hear a lot of complaints online. That's basis of the thumbnail on the screen. There seems to be this huge battle going on between the metric system versus the imperial system, where people complain about America's measurement system and our freedom units versus international units. And that was also an example of the necessity to have the conversation of how to start teaching future generations the measurement systems and the math systems that they'll need to embrace the future and our future economies. That's just the background information that I wanted to give back for the bitric and the metric system. So let's circle back. So you're saying that when you were in school, there was very little concentration on either the bitric or the metric system, and the focus was primarily on topics that learners struggle to understand.
No, the focus was on academic math and math theory, not application.
Got it.
And that's where I would say 90% of the focus is in the established educational system.
Theoretical math.
It's focused on theoretical math
Versus pragmatic, applicable math.
Exactly. And I agree with you that that practical, applicable math should be the primary priority. We should switch that and make the majority of math that the general populace uses to be focused on practical, applicable math instead of theory. Don't get me wrong, I still think math theory is important. I love math as much as the next guy, and it's amazing being able to see what numbers do. But that's not how the majority of people are using numbers in the real world. But we're faced with this conundrum where even though that ideal reality is what we're working towards, we're in a reality where that is not the case. And we're in a reality where the majority of people are forced to learn this theory because it's what's on the test and it's what's going to get them an A. And they want to get a scholarship so that they can go to their dream school. And if they don't have certain credentials or a certain GPA in their math and science and engineering class, then they can't get into their dream school. Then they're stuck, right?
Right.
So they're two different problems, right? Mm-hmm. There's the problem of U.S. citizens not understanding the innate measurement system that came with this country. Mm-hmm. And how it relates to other countries outside of the United States, which prevents our general population from being able to become fully global citizens. Mm. And two is a lack of understanding of math in general, math outside of the units, right? Mm-hmm. Because in my physics class, if you want to calculate the force that's going to go on an object, if you apply a certain amount of energy to it, that can be measured in joules and by square feet or square meters, mm-hmm. right? If a learner doesn't understand what a square is and how it relates to the physical real world and how it relates to math in practice, then they're stuck. Right. It's going to be difficult for them. Even if they have a solid understanding of the units and how the units relate, that's a huge step up. Mm-hmm. But if they don't understand how they relate to each other in the math and in application, mm-hmm. then they're stuck. Right. So I want to make sure that we put a focus on not only teaching the units, which again is very important, but also teaching teaching how the math works and how to apply it, and focusing more and in order to pull people in so that they can learn both, so that they can solve both of these issues. Mm-hmm. They're only aware of one issue, and that issue is I need to pass a test, and algebra is hard and I don't understand statistics, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can reel them in by saying, hey, we can help make algebra and statistics and geometry easy for you, then I think that's a great way for us to reel in that audience so that they can get the benefit of both of the solutions.
You know what? I would agree with you if my life experience had proven that model effective. Mm-hmm. I've been an educator for well over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the American school system, and the challenge with trying to cater to helping people be successful in that system is daunting, in that for a couple of reasons. number one, the current model is not proving to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone has a machine that produces epidemic levels of math anxiety, as well as poor performance in many of its major metropolitan areas,
Mm-hmm.
like the majority of the major inner cities of the United States of America have poor math performance. To me, that is saying that, okay, it's not the learners necessarily that are a problem, but if someone is consistently for 5 decades producing achievement gaps, math anxiety, and poor math outcomes that have consistently declined since the beginning of the space race, our math performance has declined since Sputnik, since moon, our travel to the moon, which means the global dollars that have been invested and the approach that's been taken since the 1960s has produced outcomes that are worse than the outcomes we received prior.
Mm-hmm.
So to integrate into that system, if you're trying to produce something that has successful outcomes, might be problematic, and something as simple as it's not a good fit. Now, in my research, what I found is that there is a lot of regulation, bureaucracy, and red tape that prevent innovation and agency of educators, teachers, and parents to have a voice towards changing that system.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about bureaucracy and red tape that requires, in some cases, cronyism, in some cases requires peer review, in some cases requires, evaluations. It's just red tape when there are immediate solutions at one's disposal that they can just get on the internet.
Right.
So that system of trying to align oneself to the existing model is a challenge in and of itself, just penetrating the bureaucracy and the red tape, as well as the model is antiquated. It just takes so long to have an impact. So if I take my child to the emergency room and it's obvious that there's an urgent need for them to get immediate care, and then the receptionist at the desk says, well, you're going to need to make an appointment. And I said, okay, when the next time we can come in? And they say, okay, we 3 months from now. And if there's a life-threatening condition that's in the immediate, that's not an option.
Right.
So to me, to look at a failing system that is not serving the learners to the level that is preparing them for the future is not something you should try to force fit yourself into.
And I agree. I'm not saying try to force fit ourselves into that system. Mm-hmm. I would vehemently disagree with that. What I'm saying is, if we stick with that emergency room analogy, is that we become the minute clinic or the emergency response team. Well, you know how they have disaster relief teams that go out and provide emergency medical assistance when there are disasters or natural disasters and whatnot.
Yes.
We can function as that team to help solve these issues that parents and students themselves are facing. And then when they go to their teachers or when they go to these established networks, they hear you need to be put on a waiting list, right? And so that's what I'm more an advocate of, is for us to be able to have these parents and students come to us and say, well, first off, we can both agree that geometry is pretty important and necessary, right? As a subject and as it contributes to our built environment, geometry is pretty important.
Here's a problem with how I'm interpreting what you're saying.
Okay.
I'll come back to geometry. Yes, geometry is important, but it's not adequately taught in isolation.
I agree.
So when you say geometry is important, yes, but geometry is an organ of a body of knowledge.
Right.
And if you a body is greater than the sum total of its parts, because you need synergy.
Right.
You need the entire body of knowledge when it comes to mathematics, because they're all related. The lung needs the heart, needs the other organs. Now, let's circle back to your minute clinic analogy. If you have people coming to the minute clinic saying, I have an ailment from the mainstream learning hospital, and it says that I have dyscalculia,
right,
or it says I have ADHD, or it says that I have a low GPA, or it says that I have a learning disability. It's like, no, all you have is a learning experience that failed you. There's nobody over there at Learning Institution Hospital that knows how to adequately teach math. The majority of the doctors over there have been given a completely new way of doing medicine due to Common Core standard regulations, and they have inadequate professional development that's limited, that's not continuous. They have math anxiety that they've inherited from a previous generation. They're over there terrified of math, and the reality is they don't know how to provide a solution that you're seeking for your child. So they've labeled your child with an ailment that they're incapable of curing.
right,
Now you're at our minute clinic saying that your child has an ailment that they've diagnosed incorrectly.
right.
So for me to start attempting to provide solutions based on their diagnostic could be an error.
But that's why we would run our own diagnostic and take a look at the issue. That's why in the real world, you even go out and get second opinions from other doctors, because different ailments can all bring about the same symptom.
So what's the top ailment that most Americans are suffering from right now?
I would say math anxiety,
Period.
since 93% of Americans have some level of it. So,
Right. So we're talking about, and we need to find an article for where that. But yeah, that's an incredible statistic. 93% of Americans, that's almost 100%, suffer from some varying form of math anxiety. So
from mild to extremely severe.
Right. So if that's the primary problem is math anxiety, then that's what needs to be addressed first. And that's not a math problem. That's a psychological and an emotional problem.
Right.
Okay. So to me, that's the primary focus. How to prevent the continuance of math anxiety. And if it's emotional and it's a psychological issue, then we have to look into how to do that. So in my research, the way to do that is to look at other countries, especially countries that derive from ancient societies, and learn the methodologies that they've used to become successful in mathematics, which is, again, circling back to our thumbnail, the art form that many global citizens, especially young people, are in love with today is manga and anime. You know, and some of the most successful countries and nations on international tests when it comes to mathematics use manga as in their and chibi and kawaii and their
educational system, and as an educational tool,
and their materials. And even prior to that, if you go back to ancient civilizations, even the ancient Egyptians, if you look at their hieroglyphs, they look like pretty much
They're like comic books.
Yeah. Child-centered, colorful activity books and comic books, going back to some of the most successful and advanced civilizations on Earth. And since the qubit system was used to build that civilization, then we should look at other child-centered approaches that they used and play-based approaches that they used in their early education system, because that education system built one of the most advanced and sophisticated societies, humanity has ever
on Earth.
Yeah, even Mayan. If you look at Mayan hieroglyphs, which are incredible, right here in the Americas, it's the same thing. The learners had these very attractive and inviting images full of color that were used as part of their education process. I think that that's the approach we should consider when moving forward versus trying to retrofit successful systems into current systems that are not proving to be thoroughly effective. So using your I have a quick question for you. Using your analogy, Minute Clinic versus Math Hospital, Math Hospital Central. If you met a surgeon called, they call him Id the Shaky Hand Butcher. That's the name of your surgeon.
I would not trust him.
His name is Id the Shaky Hand Butcher. He is the top surgeon in a major metropolitan area. He's the only surgeon that you can go to, and he has a 20% success rate. He's surprised when people survive. Id is surprised when they go to recovery instead of the morgue. It's like, what? Id says they made it. His name is Id the Shaky Hand Butcher. His middle name is Iat. So Id the Shaky Hand Butcher, middle name Iat.
Iat shaking hand.
Butcher. That's your surgeon.
Yeah.
20% survival rate. 80%. There's an 80% chance if you lay down on this table, you're not coming out of surgery alive. There are school districts in the United States of America who have a 20% proficiency rate in mathematics. Major urban centers, 20% proficiency, which means the majority of children are failing. Even if the statistics were 30%, which is an improvement, 40%, it's still failure. You had the majority of young people who matriculate through that system and not be ready for the real world when it comes to mathematics. I wouldn't put a loved one that I have in the hands of Id. Shaky hands he wouldn't have a scalpel over one of my loved ones. So when you have learning environments that are producing low performance as a norm, I don't think it's in the best interest of responsible parents to trust their children with those systems, because I understand you're limited to what you're limited to with what you had in life. But Jesse Owens, who ended up being one of the fastest runners on earth for his generation, had tumors in his leg when he was younger, and I think his mother or his grandmother removed them, performed surgery on Jesse Owens. You talk about homeschool. Provided surgery on this boy to take tumors out of his leg, and he went on to become one of the fastest runners of his generation, if not the
fastest man of his day.
Yes. So it took a great deal of confidence and faith in that parent to protect the best interests of that child. And she trusted herself more than she trusted Id, the shaky hand butcher. I think we can do better as parents if we want our agency to demand that our children have the best education possible, even if we have to provide it ourselves. And then with our success, we improve the learning institutions of our country. We here in America have the benefit of deriving from freedom fighters. From day one, the majority of Americans are people who were exiled or enslaved or forced out of their country or seeking greater opportunities. The refugees, outcasts from all over the world have come over to this country and have built a country that demands freedom for its citizens. And it is our responsibility as free Americans to make sure that our institutions recognize our voice and they begin to reflect what we consider is in the best interest of our children and what we consider is in the best interest of our country, and not try to force feed us what some corporate
Established.
Sometimes they're not even established. They're just some type of corporate giant who's trying to monopolize an industry and monetize it. So they create extreme hurdles for smaller innovators so that they can gain the largest market share of an educational institution, which I understand. Here's the advantage of that. It's very difficult to supply a uniform system of education to an entire nation.
Especially when it's not just the United States.
Yeah, and the other challenge is that each state has its own rights. We don't have to accept a federally proposed math program because we have the freedom to say no. That's not the case for other countries, especially socialist countries. If the government says this is what you're going to teach throughout the entire nation, let's give China, for example. China, if the government says this is what's going to be taught the entire nation, that's what's taught to the entire nation, period. They will enforce that, regulate it. There's nothing you can do. A province in China can't say, no, we think we're going to go with something different. Here in the United States of America, the federal government can propose Common Core, but the states have to vote to accept it. The most commonly used program, I think, in the United States of America is Eureka Math, if I'm not mistaken. Recently, Washington, D.C. decided to change and not use Eureka Math anymore because we have that right. Okay. So that's great, but all of these programs that are being forced into the school system, they didn't have a meeting with the parents and say, hey, what do you all think? What approaches are you currently using in your community that's successful? Educators, let's get some voice from you on these approaches first. Let's communicate to you why we're considering making these changes. We're in a global economy. We're starting to dwindle as far as our performance on test scores. And we really need to adopt best practices from other countries that are doing better than us in math. You need to share that with American citizens so we can say, okay, this is our new Sputnik. We need to increase our math performance. But you have to give the parents and the educators agency, and you have to give them an opportunity to offer input to the conversation, because this is what really matters. And unfortunately, recently, there's been so many distractions with the social evolution and the psychological and emotional evolution of the United States of America than we are concerned with the technical and the economic evolution. Because We have countries, we have international peers that are making 200-year plans on how to move into the future. And here in our country, we're having conversations, divisive conversations based on our social preferences and our social and our ideology and things in that nature. And we're not opening up the conversation for math solutions. So having that diversity and having different states and having different regulations and bureaucracy and red tape, it makes it challenging for us to say, how's the baby doing? Where's the baby right now? Are they in the emergency room, or have they been, has there been an intake? Have they been given a diagnosis? How are they performing? What's going on with the baby? And we're in the lobby arguing over, conversations that aren't related to the problem. So that's why Bitrick and American Math have been introduced to give parents and educators agency so we can start the conversations that matter towards making sure our children are adequately educated. I'm so grateful for the internet because it gives us an opportunity to start developing solutions that our children and our community need, that we can work together to ultimately get into the school system after we've proven efficacy. As a community. We have to come together as a community with our own courage, innovation, and agency, and have the conversations that matter pertaining on how to improve math education here in America and throughout the world. I'll let you close. I think this has been a great podcast. I want to thank everybody for attending or listening to this far. You can check us out at bitric.org, BITRIC, or you can find us at americanmath.com. Again, thanks again for listening. Jelani, is there anything else you wanted to say before we close?
No, I don't think there's anything else that I had to say. I look forward to continuing in our work as we go forward and build these math solutions.
Thanks again for listening. Bitric.org, americanmath.com. Join us, hashtag American Math Movement, as our goal is to improve math outcomes and academic performance here in America and throughout the world. Thanks a lot for listening. Happy learning.